I love movies. Anybody out there with me? Just love watching movies. I enjoy most everything about them. Not just the fact that my wife and I can get away from the kids and go to a theater, but that's amazing. But the idea of movies, I really enjoy them, and I don't enjoy them like a lot of people enjoy them. For me, like, I'm able to suspend reality and actually imagine what I would be doing in that alternate universe of whatever movie it is. To the point where I hate watching deleted scenes or blooper reels that happen whenever a lot of videos come out. You get to see the bloopers, or whether it's a sitcom or a movie, whatever, I get to experience it in a different way than a lot of people do, because I'm able to just completely suspend reality and be caught up in the story, caught up in the moment. I see dead people. A few of you, no, I don't really right now, but a few of you right now had an emotional response whenever I said that. You hear that words, maybe you were sitting in the theater, or maybe you were on your couch in 1999 when the movie The Sixth Sense came out and Bruce Willis starts going through this. You had that moment because one of the greatest reveals in cinematic history took place, and everyone was like floored. I'm not going to tell you what it was. If you don't know what it is, it's not that big of a deal. But for some of us, the movie was ruined because I knew what was happening. I had been told what was happened. I was told what the plot was, what the big reveal was, so whenever the moment came in the film, I already knew it. I wasn't able to experience it as fully as I thought I should have been able to experience it. And it kind of dulled the senses a little bit. It kind of, no pun intended, but it kind of made me feel like just a little bit cheated because I didn't get the full experience. Stories are a powerful thing because it's one thing that we're able to latch onto and kind of see ourselves in the story that's happening. And that's what's happening here in commandment number 4. Remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. This is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Today we're going to be talking about this fourth commandment, which is the longest commandment of the 10. And as I was doing a lot of research, I feel like maybe the reason that it's the longest commandment is it's because it's one of the most difficult ones that the Israelites had to keep. They were constantly messing up this commandment. And many of you in this room have an experience with this commandment. Maybe you weren't even going to church, but somebody in your family, somebody in your sphere of influence began to influence you to keep the Sabbath day holy, the things that you were and were not supposed to do on the Sabbath. So in order to help flesh that out a little bit, I've asked a dear friend of mine to come up and kind of give us a peek into her life. And so Karen Lobdell, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to come on up. You guys can make her feel welcome. There are some of you who have not had the opportunity to meet Karen. Some of you have, and you understand her heart and her wisdom. And I'm just absolutely excited that I get to interview her a little bit today about the Sabbath. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
You're welcome.
So again, like I said, some of the people here have no clue who you are. Many of them do. But I just wanted you to take a minute and tell us a little bit about who you are, growing up, just where you're from, all of that fun stuff.
Okay. My name's Karen. I won't tell you the rest of it because you've never heard that name before.
Wait, now you've got to say it.
I was named for my grandmother.
Okay.
Her name was Mamie Rathelda, so I'm Karen Rathelda.
Okay.
And nobody's ever heard that name before.
No, that's unique.
I used to hate it, but I kind of like it now.
Good.
But anyhow, I was born in Marion, Ohio. I lived there for 16 years. I was number 11 of a family of 12 children.
Wow.
So I was one of the babies. A lot of them were grown up by the time I came along. But, and I'm the only one left of those 12.
Wow.
My last brother died just a few weeks ago.
Wow.
So anyhow, it was a active household, to say the least. Lots of people in and out all the time. It was a place where we felt loved and cared for, and we didn't know we were poor, but we were. But we had plenty to eat because my mom did an awesome job of canning all the vegetables and things out of the garden that we raised. And
So you raised all your food and then...
a lot of it,
Wow.
yes. And my dad was a carpenter, so he was the breadwinner. My mother was the homemaker and took care of the family in the home.
Christian family?
Yes.
Very good.
We went to church. We were tied to Marion First Church.
Oh, wow.
I went there from the time I was a babe in arms, and went there until they formed the other church in Marion, Kensington, and I went there as a teenager, young teenager. So church has been important all my life.
It sounds like it.
Yes.
So you've been in church your entire life. I'm not going to ask you how long that has been, but you've been in church your entire life, and that's...
Pretty much. I mean, I'm not saying there weren't times that I might have strayed, because I did.
Right.
But that was my home base. That was what called me back.
So for you, growing up in a Christian home, what did a typical Sunday look like? Going to church, what did that look like?
Sunday school, church, Sunday night church. So when the doors were open, pretty much we went.
Right.
I went. If everybody didn't go, I went a lot, yes. It was very important, and it's what I liked and what I knew.
Yeah. So when we were talking earlier and going through this, you said something that kind of caught me off guard a little bit, but you said Sunday started before Sunday.
Yeah.
What did you explain that for us?
Well, Saturday night you got your bath. Your clothes were all ready and pressed and cleaned. Your shoes were polished. Your curlers were in your hair. So we got ready for Sunday to make ourselves our best we could be to go to the Lord's house.
And what are some things that you did or didn't do on Sunday?
We did go to church. We ate well. We always had Sunday dinner.
Okay.
That was a special time. We had family in, or we went to visit family. It was just a laid-back kind of day where you didn't work. We didn't mow the yard. We didn't go shopping. We didn't... It was just a relaxing day.
It was a relax. So if the lawn didn't get mowed on Saturday,
It waited.
it waited. It
Yeah.
waited till Monday.
Yeah.
Wow. And there was very little eating out or shopping other than necessities?
Right. We didn't shop on Sunday. A lot of places weren't even open on Sunday in that time, but we just prepared for Sunday before it got there to the best that we could.
That's awesome. Now, for you, do you think this was more of just your family thing, or was it more of a cultural thing, or at least the area?
I think a lot of families lived that way, at that time. There weren't all the things going on in the world. There wasn't Sunday sports like there is now, and but it was the way our family chose to live, and I think it was a good way.
Awesome. So that was a lot of your experience growing up. You said until you were 16, you lived in Marion. You got married. You and Don have been married for how long?
57 years.
57 years. That's amazing. And you've had your own kids and grandkids and now great-grandkids, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the traditions, the things that you've done that you've kept, now implementing them in your family?
Well, we did many of the same things. We didn't shop on Sunday. We didn't eat out very often. We eat out more now than we did then. They're all gone and we have more money. But, lived a pretty simple life, I think, and the kids were always welcome to bring friends home with them on Sunday. We'd rather they play in our yard than for our kids to go and play where we didn't know what.
Interesting, yeah.
But we've tried and Don was raised similarly, I think.
Okay. Still Sunday dinners?
Well, not as much.
But is that one thing that you tried to keep in your family?
Yeah, we did. We would have dinner cooked at home and around the table. We didn't eat in front of the TV or anything like that. We sat at the table with the table silverware in the right place and all of that,
Now, when we were talking, you mentioned something, and it made me laugh because it made me think of some of my upbringing. But some of your kids and even grandkids at times have said, that's not a Sunday meal. That's not a Sunday meal. What do you mean by that? What do you think they meant by that? Or what do you mean by that?
Well, when they say, we could have spaghetti for dinner, I say, oh, that's not a Sunday meal. That's an everyday meal, because it's quick and easy and all of that. But Sunday meal was a little more effort put into it, a roast in the oven with potatoes and carrots, maybe pie for dessert, and, just a nicer meal where we all sat down together as a family.
So pizza's okay.
On Saturday night.
But you were talking about that and how the types of foods, and a lot of times your family gives you teases you for some of that. But pizza just seems more impersonal, and that's what you were sharing with me earlier.
Yeah.
And how it's kind of just grab and go, and that Sunday is just a very let's intentionally spend time.
It's family time.
Wow.
Still is. Even if I don't cook, we still sometimes go out as a group to eat dinner together.
So let me ask you this last question in closing. Why do you choose? Why do you continue to choose to live this way? Why do you do those things that you're doing?
Why would I not? Because, I was brought up that way, but it's deeper than that. God's done so much for me, helped me along the way in the rough spots in my life. And if I didn't have him, I'd be a miserable person, I guess. But, he's brought me through a lot of things and helped me in so many ways. And this is a way I can give back and show my love to him and respect for him.
Wow. Thank you so much. Give her a round of applause. Thank you so much. I think one of the beautiful things about that story is we're able to see parts of who maybe our parents were or grandparents are or who we are today. And there's so much that happens that our culture is built around Sundays from history of what we do. And this is how we honor the Sabbath day. This is how we keep it holy, and we follow these rules and regulations. But in Karen's story, you heard it was more than just the rules and the regulations. It was more than just the law. It was more than just the thing that needed to be done. It was the way to show respect. And in that respect, there was the gift that God had given to us. It was this idea of 6 days set apart for work and then 1 day set apart for God. But it's not always been like this. If we even look back, rewind a few years, this is something that, again, the people of Israel, God's people have struggled with. What does it mean to honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy? And in Mark chapter 2, we find a verse, we find a story of the people, the Pharisees, kind of beginning to question Jesus on what the rules were for the Sabbath. Because what they did is they got this command, honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And they decided, you know what? In order to do that the best way possible, we need to make it into laws. We need to make it into rules so we know how to act. We know how not to act. In fact, there was this idea there was a law that they weren't allowed, as the Jewish people weren't allowed to walk more than 3,045 feet on the Sabbath, because anything over that was considered work. And how they figured it is they knew it was exciting to come to church. They wanted everyone to come and worship God together. They wanted everyone to come to the synagogue. And the synagogue would have been built in the middle of the town, would have been built in the middle of the city. And then they would measure out how far it is, roughly a quarter of a mile to the edges, to the outskirts of the city. And so they measured it that way to be able to come in. You were able, from the outskirts, to be able to walk in to the synagogue, attend church, and then attend, the teaching, and then walk home. But everything else was to be restful. You weren't supposed to do anything that, any chores or any work that was unnecessary for survival. And so in Mark chapter 2, we come across Jesus walking through a field with his disciples. And his disciples grabbed some wheat, grabbed some whatever was in the field, and began eating it as they were listening and walking with Jesus. And it was through that time the Pharisees came out and began to point fingers and said, "You are breaking the Sabbath. This is not something that you need to be doing. Why would you do it?" You see, because the Israelite people thought that, you know what? If you're doing anything that you're not supposed to be doing, if you're not following the law, the Mosaic law that we've set up, you're ending up spoiling that time on ourselves. We'll end up taking that time and just using it for us. The sacred time that God has set apart, we'll use it for ourselves. So we need to make sure that we keep the law in order to not be selfish with our time. The story continues as he points out some of the flaws in their argument. And he continues, he says this, "Then Jesus said to them, 'The Sabbath was made to meet the needs of people, and not people to meet the requirements of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even over the Sabbath.'" It was this idea of work. Work had to be done in your own time, and then this rest, this relaxing time for God. But that turned really quickly into a legalistic idea to where you could only follow these rules. And they actually, again, accused Jesus of breaking this. If you skip forward, Jesus does a miracle on the Sabbath also and heals a man's hand. And it says immediately the Pharisees became angry at Jesus and what he's doing, and they actually went to plot to kill him in that moment. I mean, it wasn't okay to eat some kernels of grain, or it wasn't okay to heal a man's hand, but plotting somebody's murder on the Sabbath was doable. They didn't see that a lot of times the irony in what they were doing. They were about following the laws. They became so legalistic. See, Jesus wasn't angry that they were watching him. They were watching him and what he was doing. He was angry at their heart that they became angry at this. It doesn't sound a lot like Karen's story, where it becomes the essence of who you are and the gratitude and the showing of respect as to what God has done for us. But if we go back even a little bit further in biblical history, we find another story. Before God gave the Ten Commandments, we found a story of God's people who had just been set free from slavery. They had been slaves for 430 years in Egypt. They were under the rule of a pharaoh, of a tyrant, who told them when they were allowed to eat, when they weren't allowed to eat, what they were allowed to eat, how they had to work. A brutal master who forced them to do his bidding, forced them to do everything he wanted. And as slaves, the Israelites were subject to a continual work week. 7 days of work, followed by 7 days of work, followed by 7 days of work, followed by 7 days of work. All while the accomplishments of those who held power over them were flaunted in their face. This thing that they were building wasn't even something that they approved of. It was something that the culture of the time dictated to them. And so they were caught in this slavery, this bondage of working and working and working, because that's what they had to do. The Israelites were used literally until they died from the exhausting work they were put through. Never having a day off, never having a day's rest, their very existence was at the mercy of a relentless tyrant. what little time they did have to celebrate their gatherings, to celebrate their God, to observe the holidays of their religion, of their God, was the time of the in-between. The time when they were absolutely exhausted from their work, and they would meet together in their houses, and they would read the scriptures, and they would talk about how one day God will set them free so they are free to worship God the way that they see fit. But while they were in slavery, it became a challenge. It became difficult to worship God the way they wanted to because they were constantly working. So before we get to Exodus chapter 20, where God gives this command, there's a story about God freeing the people from bondage, from slavery, from Egypt. And they walked across the Red Sea, and they're out in the wilderness, and they start complaining because they don't have enough food to eat. And God provides for them. He provides for them manna, and He provides for them quail from heaven, and they are able to eat. And He gives them this opportunity. He gives them this time. And He says, here's what I want you to do. Every day I want you to go out, and I want you to collect the things that you need. Don't keep it over. Every morning you go out and work. Go out and supply for yourself. But here's the catch. On the 6th day, I want you to gather enough food for 2 days. I want you to gather enough food for 2 days because I want you to have a day of rest. The people were in disbelief. Go read Exodus chapter 16 this afternoon. It's a great story. But the people were in disbelief, so they tried to hoard food. And the next morning, when they would wake up on a normal day, the manna would have maggots filled in it, and it would be all spoiled, and it wouldn't be any good. And so on this 6th day, they would go out, and they were commanded to get double because there wouldn't be any there. So they would, and they were like, it's going to spoil the next day, and it didn't. God supplied for them. He said, this is a day of rest, a day that I want to give you to be able to worship the way that you see fit. And in Exodus chapter 16, verse 29, Moses was talking to his people. It's the next scripture right here. Here's what it says. They must realize that the Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. The Sabbath is the Lord's gift to you. So prior to this fourth commandment being a command given from God as a direction as to what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, this was a gift. It was set forth before them. I want you to have a gift. Imagine being in slavery for 420 years with your family and their family and their kids, and you were forced to this 7 days a week, being dictated to you when you were allowed to and not allowed to do things. But if you go all the way back to the beginning in creation, God set up this new pattern of 6-1. 6-1. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. He created the earth in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. He wasn't done creating. This enjoyment, this relationship that he was in with his people was part of the creation. God never intended for his people to work 7 days, 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. There's a pattern in there about sleep that we can't avoid as humans. We end up crashing at night after we've worked, whatever our toil is. Maybe it's of our own design, maybe it's being dictated to us, but there's this pattern that we can't get away from and sleep. This 7 days a week, 7 days a week, 7 days a week. The Israelites had a name for working 7 days a week. Slavery. And it's what God set them free from. God set them free and said, I want you to work 6 days because it's good to work. But take that 1 day and worship me, reconnect with me, rest. Many of us, even to this day, we end up doing one of a few things that history has shown us. We end up in a 7-day work week where we're constantly working only to rest when our body tells us we have to. And we end up working so hard and so tired we get burnt out. God doesn't want that for us. There's some of us, on the other hand, that why the Mosaic law is there is because they didn't want that to be used for self. You go out and work 5 days a week so you can spend the other 2 days on you and yourself, what I want. You see, God set this new Sabbath. God set this Sabbath as a day to enjoy, to reconnect in relationship with him, to thank him for setting us free from the bondage that he found us in. You see, when we don't honor the Sabbath, either by taking it and making it selfish because of what we want, or by going out and working and never and only having God as the time of the in-between, we're equivalently enslaving ourselves to another master. Imagine that moment, giving a slave for 40 years who has been told what to do every day of their life. Imagine giving them a day to say, this is your time, and they say, no, I don't want it. You can't imagine it. But God gave this gift to his people, this Sabbath, as a gift, not as a command first, as a gift, as an example to join him in recreating and rest. But we looked at it as an obligation. As his people, we see it as an obligation, something that must be met, or something that doesn't apply to us. I'm going to go ahead and have the band come on up because we're going to worship today as we close. But as I was thinking about this and I was listening to Karen's story, I had some of my own insights come up and some of my own thoughts come up. And one of the things that we did on a weekly basis was go to my grandparents' house. And I saw this as something that we had to do, and this obligation of things that, this is what has to happen. As I look back on it now, man, that time was a precious gift. And if we overlook the gift that God has given us too quickly, we end up looking at it as an obligation of things to do, a list to be kept. And when we look at the check boxes, did I do it? Did I do it? Did I do it? We end up saying, you know what? That's not what God meant for the day of rest. Does the idea of taking a Sabbath seem too good to be true? For his people, it did. They wanted to be told what to do every single time, so they created these rules and these laws. So they weren't able to keep it to themselves and make themselves be able to celebrate selfishly. They wanted it to be about God, but they missed the relationship. My challenge to you today, have you accepted God's gift into your life? Have you accepted God's gift that he's freely given into your life and be able to rest and recreate on a Sabbath day? That's what he wants for his people. He wants to set you free from the bondage of self, the bondage of others' expectations placed upon you. Are you able to rest? Are you able to renew? Are you able to celebrate relationship with God?